Hi, Neon Lore here, and welcome to Save Point Tomorrow. What if I told you that science fiction isn't just entertainment, it's a preview? What if the future we're building today was imagined decades ago by the dim light of candlelight or the rather subtle yellow light of magnesium light bulbs? What if the future has been hidden in plain sight in books, movies, and video games that have come out in the past couple decades in the case of video games, or even centuries in the case of books and movies? What if, and what if the future is very much developed and designed by what we imagine? Today we're diving into science futurism, the idea that imagination doesn't just reflect the future, it creates it. But let's start with the basics. What is science futurism? Well, science futurism is the belief that science fiction doesn't just predict the future. Again, it shapes it, it creates it. What we imagine and what we put in our comic books, movies, and books is what actually comes to happen. Because us as humans want to look up at the stars and imagine that what is possible is not just possible, it's probable. While science fiction tells stories, science futurism asks, what if those stories are blueprints? What if those blueprints can help us get to where we want to be? From going to the moon in a giant capsule that is shot out of a cannon, to sailing through the stars on a sailboat with a sail that is powered by the sun. What if these stories are blueprints? Think about this. Star Trek had tablets, smartphones, and video calls, decades before those things even became a reality. Isaac Asimov wrote about the ethics of robotics and has the 3 laws of robotics, before we ever had functional robots or even the concept of artificial intelligence. These stories are not just loved by thousands, if not millions, across the world, but they're stories that tell us that they could potentially come true. So with that, let's rewind. Where did this all start? Where did science fiction truly get its roots? Well, meet Mary Shelley, the original futurist. In 1818, she wrote Frankenstein, a story about reanimating life using science. And she wasn't writing fantasy, she was speculating. And after Mary Shelley came Jules Verne's. In the 1860s, he imagined submarines, space rockets, and undersea adventures. His launch site in From the Earth to the Moon is only a few miles away from Cape Canaveral, where the United States launches most of its space missions. All of this years, decades before spaceflight was even a possibility or even imagined, or at least not in the case of Jules Verne, but imagined by the overall scientific community. This was also imagined and theorized decades before even the creation of jet propulsion in the 1930s, late 1930s, early 1940s. And then after that, there's H.G. Wells, who talked about time travel, genetic engineering, and alien invasions. And while alien invasions and time travel are at least not currently seen in real life, or at least we think so, who knows what the government is hiding from us, genetic engineering is a reality. The idea of children being able to have their features and things like eye color, hair color, changed in utero is a possibility. It's something that is still very much in its infancy, but it is something that has been around for a decade or so. Also, recently, there was a child who was cured of a genetic disease that was going to kill that child in its early life. And because of CRISPR, which is genetic engineering, they were able to be cured of said deadly disease. So all of these things that H.G. Wells, Jules Verne, Mary Shelley have thought up, in their time that was seen as flights of fancy, and magic was not magic, it was speculative science. Then came the 20th century, bringing all these science futurism concepts to the big screen. Star Trek, which is one of the biggest sci-fi shows and movies to grace the screen in, the past couple decades, gave us plenty of science futurism technologies that they were predicting were to come to pass. They gave us communicators, which were basically flip phones. They gave us tablets, which eventually just came up to be just regular real-world tablets like iPads, or universal translators like AI, which is used today by companies like Google to create live translators for people to use when they're off in their travels. Star Trek is one of those shows that produced dozens of different technologies that in their time seemed to be far-flung and futuristic that actually became true. Heck, even the concept of faster-than-light travel in Star Trek, which is warp travel, has been shown to be potentially probable. Again, Star Trek is one of those shows that not just science fiction is not just science fiction, it's science futurism. It gives us a glimpse into potential futures or actual futures. And after that came 2001: A Space Odyssey, where HAL 9000 is a self-aware machine, calm and logical, which eventually becomes dangerous, and that's a whole other bag of worms. But Alexa, Siri, ChatGPT, and all the other AIs that we've created in the past couple of years are all just reflections of things like HAL 9000 from 2001's The Space Odyssey, or the whole other host of self-aware machines that exist in science fiction, which again is one of the many reasons why I like to call it science futurism. Now let's bring it all back a little closer to home. William Gibson gave us Neuromancer. He even coined the term cyberspace before the internet even had a name. He wrote about data smuggling, VR, digital identity, all in 1984, way before the concept of the internet, or VR chat, or having an avatar online, or World of Warcraft, or any of the massive multiplayer online games ever even became a reality, even before Blizzard existed. All of this was brought up in Neuromancer by William Gibson. All these concepts that today are taken for granted were seen decades ago. And he didn't even own a computer. Beyond that, then there's video games, a topic that is a little near and dear to my heart because I'm a gigantic nerd, as you can tell. Games like Deus Ex, Cyberpunk 2077, or Mass Effect that ask questions that are a little uncomfortable. Asking questions of what actually makes us human, because these games bring up the topics of cybernetic implants, rogue AI, and off-world colonization. At what point does the ship of Theseus kick in, and are we still people if we replace too many parts of our body? Are we still people if we allow ourselves to live on a different planet for several couple hundred years? Are we still technically even human? And then there's the concept of a rogue AI. What makes something a sapient creature? All of these things are brought up in video games, which were originally created to entertain people, children, and now are asking questions as fundamental as what makes us human. This is just another step in the whole chain of sci-fi predicting reality, of sci-fi predicting what is going to happen. It's not just entertainment, it's speculation in motion. A motion that becomes a cycle. Here's where it kind of gets a little wild. Sci-fi, or science futurism, I feel like I've said that word a little too much in this video, imagines. It creates potential possibilities. Authors like H.G. Wells and the people who are behind video games like Deus Ex, Cyberpunk, and Mass Effect, they all come up with impossible or improbable ideas of impossible or improbable vistas, places that are light years away, technology that seems almost like magic. And then scientists find a way to build it. And then society gets used to these technologies and it adapts, and new stories are written that show of improbable or impossible realms after that, and so on and so forth. However, science fiction isn't always the most hopeful. There are dozens of science fiction novels and science fiction universes that are depicting a future for humanity that is incredibly bleak and depressing. There's Gattaca with its genetic elitism. There's Dune with its also genetic elitism, but its concepts of power and where power resides, the concept of free will, and the incredibly complex back and forth of genetic engineering and human evolution. The idea that knowledge, memory, and identity are all somehow malleable. The dangers of hero worship. So many other topics that revolve around the Dune universe as a whole. It's an incredibly in-depth view of what makes us human, but also what the darker parts of humanity mean. There are other universes like Warhammer 40k that show a human empire that has been completely swallowed by deifying the leader of the Imperium of Man, and it shows basically how the Imperium does nothing but feed its people into a never-ending war. There's Black Mirror that talks about social credit scores and deep fake identities that are so real that they might as well be you, and Ex Machina, which shows just another even more darker version of AI and its potential capabilities of becoming either a scientific breakthrough or a moral crisis. All of these, the problem with all of these oppressive and bleak futures is that they're already kind of sort of here. This is not future shock, this is now. Facial recognition, brain-computer interfaces, self-driving weapons. We're standing in the sci-fi that we fear. Fortunately, sci-fi is also capable of showing us what we need to shy away from. If people and society as a whole starts looking at science fiction more as what is probable instead of what is possible, we can start using science futurism as a way to shape what our society can look like. We can start shying away from the worst aspects of science fiction and shy towards the better aspects of what sci-fi has for us, like solar punk, which is all about using technology in tandem with our environment in order to make humanity live a happier, more full life. But anyway, with all that being said, that's actually a really good place to end it. Next time we'll talk about what happens when our imagined futures start turning dark, when science fiction becomes science dystopia. So stick around, subscribe, follow, and join in the conversation, because the stories that we tell today, they're just blueprints for tomorrow. And science fiction is just reality that hasn't happened yet. So I'll see you guys next time when we talk about science dystopia, sci-fi dystopias.